It's time to breathe again on the latest breath of fresh air, Shorty, with your host, Charles Taylor. And I am here to discuss the end of the Pac 12 conference. So it escalated quickly as to how we got here, especially within the last few days. But what we have here is realignments or college realignments, first casualty, and it is the Pac 12 conference. There's no way they're going to continue going with just Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, and California. But let's remember, or let's take a closer look as to how we got here and how it's probably surprising to a few that it is the Pac 12 that is gone if you consider the history of how everything started to materialize going back, let's say, about a decade or so ago, a little bit more than a decade. Because for the longest time, it was thought the Big 12 would be the conference that was going under. Now, let's go back to 2011, 2012, when the Big 12 was actually 12 teams. But when Texas decided they were going to do the Longhorn Network, that rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way within the conference. So, as you know, without going too far into the history, not really trying to turn this into a history lesson, but I'm just throwing this out here for context. So let's remember, Texas A&M and Missouri, they bolted to the SEC. Nebraska went to the Big Ten, and Colorado went to the Pac-12. Colorado's coming back to the Big 12 now. More on that in a minute. But the Big 12 was down to 8 teams, and their future as one of the Power 5 conferences was in complete peril. But they were able to stabilize themselves by getting TCU and West Virginia into the conference, and they stuck with 10 teams. And then they decided they were going to bring their conference championship game back, put it there in Jerry World, also known as AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, and play the conference championship game with the top 2 teams in the conference, depending on how they finish throughout the regular season. So they continue to survive as a Power 5 conference, and then all of a sudden, Texas and Oklahoma decides they want to go to the SEC. So again, looks like the Big 12 is in big time danger. But what they ended up doing was adding 4 teams to try to keep that status. They got, let me see, yeah, BYU, Central Florida, Cincinnati, and Houston to join the conference. And then news came out this week that they were adding, of course, Colorado, which I mentioned earlier. And then it came down, I guess, around Friday night, Saturday morning time frame, maybe Friday afternoon, where Arizona State, and Utah were also joining the Big 12. As for the rest of the teams, why the Pac 12 is basically down to 4 teams, uh, Oregon and Washington are joining the Big Ten. So this is what we have. We have the Big Ten with 18 teams now. 18 teams. And the Big 12 will have 16 teams when all is said and done, when Texas and Oklahoma goes to the SEC, which will happen in 2024. All the rest of the teams I had mentioned, they're also joining their respective conferences in 2024 as well. And the SEC, or excuse me, so Big Ten, 18 teams. The Big 12 has 16 teams. The SEC will have 16 teams, and the ACC, I think they have 14 teams. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And then you have Notre Dame, who's basically trying to eat cake from everywhere. But uh, the, here's your first casualty of the conference realignment, and we know college football is the big driver behind it. Obviously, the other sports have something to do with it too, basketball especially, but this is purely football moves. You know, football is the driver of the bus when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So we have, well, number one, we have conferences that can't count. They need to recount and rename their conferences. But you have a conference in the Pac-12 that is, I mean, they're done. They're dead. It's over for the Pac-12, and they really have themselves to blame. Number one, let's go back to the whole thing about the media rights deal that the commissioner George Kiliakov, I think that's how you say his name. If that's wrong, please correct me. But when you have no future, there's no network that is going to want to put their name on a contract next to your conference. The future at best was cloudy, at best. Now it is very, very bleak, and it is pretty much over for the Pac 12 conference. And the commissioner back in the day, Larry Scott, he had the chance. Now, with these other networks or these other conferences, they were trying to get networks with whatever with whatever partner that was going to be there. The Big Ten partnered with Fox, and of course they have contracts with other networks. But the Big Ten network is a Fox entity. The SEC, they had their stuff going on. They have the SEC network on ESPN. They're going to go to ESPN completely when the conference season or when the season starts next year or in 2024. And then the Big 12, they have their media rights deals, and so does the ACC. The Pac 12 said they're going to depend on their reputation and their teams being successful on the field of play to go ahead and get whatever's coming to them. It sounds like a good strategy if you're actually winning, but the Pac 12 wasn't winning anything. I don't recall the last national championship the Pac 12 has won. I want to say it goes back to 2004 when USC won. You had a couple teams. I mean, Oregon was in the playoff. They got to the championship game in 2010 and 2014, but were beaten by Auburn and Ohio State, respectively. But it's a mess for the Pac 12, and this conference is done. They're going to try to scramble. You know, they're going to do what they can to try to add teams like San Diego State. Maybe they poach off of the Mountain West Conference and the other teams in the Big West Conference. And whatever other conference that's out there in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. But it's over for the Pac 12 as a power conference, and or for the Pac 12 as a power conference. And this is the casualty of conference realignment. It's the first casualty of conference realignment. It's just crazy because it looked so for so long that it was going to be the Big 12 that is gone, but the Big 12 has landed on their feet, or at least for the time being, and the Pac 12 is the one that is suffering the major blow. Well, that is what I'm breathing on for today. Y'all make sure y'all visit the Breath of Fresh Air YouTube channel, smash that subscribe button, and follow the Breath of Fresh Air Facebook page. There should be a blog article coming later on this week. And until then, everybody take care. Have a good beginning of the week. Have a great Monday. Y'all take care.